A bear cried and begged a stranger to save its trapped cub, then a miracle happened. In the heart of Glacier National Park, under the vast sky streaked with soft hues of dawn, I stumbled upon a scene that would forever change the way I perceived nature's silent pleas. A mother bear stood at the edge of the pine forest, her massive form trembling as she emitted the most heartbreaking sound, like a sob carried on the wind. Unsure whether to approach, I felt her eyes on me, pleading for help. No words could convey the intensity of that charged moment. I realized I wasn't merely an observer in this majestic wilderness. I had become a lifeline, a flicker of hope for a desperate soul. I arrived at Glacier National Park on a brisk autumn morning. It was my first time traveling alone in years, a solitary expedition I had been planning ever since my life had veered down unfamiliar and disheartening paths. My name is Elena Suarez, a small-town librarian who had always dreamed of seeing the world's most breathtaking places. After a painful breakup and the passing of my grandmother, my last close relative, I decided it was time to live the life I had kept on pause. I chose Glacier National Park not just because it was a gem of Montana's wilderness but because I felt drawn to the raw power of the Rocky Mountains. Lakes shimmered like polished mirrors, waterfalls cascaded in glimmering veils of mist on sunlit afternoons, and the wind that blew through pine trees whispered secrets of ancient times. Even its name, Glacier, spoke of resilience and endurance, as centuries-old ice carved its way through rock. That first morning, the sun was shy, its golden light peeking tentatively over craggy mountaintops. The crispness of the air invigorated my senses, stirring within me a thrill for discovery. My plan was simple: hike some of the lesser-known trails, take photographs, and try to absorb something intangible that no city or suburban life could offer, a deeper connection to the world and my place in it. I set off with a small backpack carrying necessities: water, energy bars, a camera, a first aid kit, and my grandmother's old notebook in which she recorded bird species. She had gifted me that notebook when I was a girl, telling me that nature's wonders could heal wounds I never even knew I had. I hoped she was right. As I walked the trail near Lake McDonald, I fell under the spell of the vibrant tapestry nature had woven: pine, fir, and spruce standing tall against the brightening sky, red and yellow undergrowth lighting up the forest floor like tiny candles, and the serene reflection of mountains in the lake's still surface. My footsteps crunched the gravel softly, and each breath carried the scent of pine needles and damp earth. I took my first photograph at the lake's edge, the mountainous skyline mirrored in the water. Closing my eyes for a moment, I listened to the breeze ruffle the pages of my grandmother's notebook in my pack. There was a silent energy in the air, something unspoken yet deeply profound. It felt as though the land was introducing itself to me, not through words, but through a silent, welcoming handshake of rustling leaves and hushed waves on the shore. Hours slipped by as I leisurely explored, stopping every so often to capture a curious bird or the interplay of sunlight dancing on leaves. By midday, I veered off the busier trail. I had studied the park's map thoroughly and wanted to avoid the crowds, to lose myself in a more secluded realm where old pines towered over narrow footpaths. The new path I followed was quieter than the main trails. I didn't see another hiker for at least an hour. Occasionally, I heard the flutter of wings in the branches above or the rustle of small critters scurrying under the brush. My heartbeat and the gentle rush of a distant stream were my sole companions. Then I heard something unusual, a sound that didn't belong to the gentle chorus of nature. It was a cry, but not a human cry. It resonated through the trees like a forlorn melody, urging me onward. I stood still, half in awe, half in apprehension. The cry rose and fell in mournful waves, like a sob that made my heart clench. I told myself it could be an injured animal. My instincts, and my caution, due to being in bear country, told me to keep my distance. Yet curiosity pulled me like a magnet. Slowly, I inched forward, stepping carefully to avoid any accidental snapping of twigs that might startle a wild creature. The sound grew louder, echoing the heartbreak I had once felt in my own life, loss, desperation, and a desperate plea for help. Rounding a bend in the trail, I saw a large, dark form near a towering pine. I knew immediately it was a bear. From her size and the tan muzzle that contrasted with her thick brown fur, she was most likely a mother grizzly. She looked enormous compared to the black bears I had once glimpsed back home. Her presence demanded respect, her raw power an unspoken warning. Yet she was swaying from side to side, making soft, guttural whimpering sounds I had never associated with a creature so strong. It was not a roar of aggression, it was an anguished cry. I paused behind a cluster of bushes, adrenaline surging through my veins, torn between fear and compassion. My mind reeled with questions. Was she hurt? Was she sick? Had she lost her cub? I glanced around and saw no sign of immediate danger, though my senses were on high alert. Bears were unpredictable, especially a mother bear, and especially if her cub was near. And then I saw it. A small shape, high up in the pine, perched on a precarious branch, squeaking in a language I could almost interpret as panic. The cub was stuck. The mother bear's attention was not on me, it was entirely on the cub clinging to the tree, perhaps too frightened to climb down. One misstep up there, and the little one could fall, potentially leading to serious injury or worse. I remained motionless for a minute, examining the scene. Instinct told me to back away. I was, after all, in the territory of a powerful apex predator. But something tugged at my heart, compassion, maternal instincts of my own, even though I wasn't a mother. The mother bear kept looking around anxiously, pacing, letting out that pitiful whine, as if seeking help from anyone or anything that could provide it. Against all logic, I felt a need to help. A voice in the back of my mind whispered caution, "This is dangerous. What can you do? You're just a person with no experience in wildlife rescue." But the alternative was to do nothing, to let fate run its course, which possibly meant watching a young life slip away if it fell. That thought churned my stomach in a dismal swirl of heartbreak. Very slowly, I stepped out from the cover of the trees. The bear stopped her pacing and locked eyes with me. My heart thundered. Fight or flight instincts told me to freeze. She let out a low moan, almost a plea, and took a single step forward. I flinched, ready to bolt. But then she stopped, head lowered, as though in surrender. I realized that if she had wanted to harm me, she would have charged. Instead, her entire posture spoke of desperation, not aggression. She was, in her own way, begging. I raised my palms to show her I wasn't a threat. My voice trembled as I spoke softly. "It's okay, Mama. I'm here to help." It was ridiculous, talking to a wild bear as though she could understand my language. But I believed, in her own way, she understood the gentleness in my tone. The sincerity in my stance. Bears have better senses than we give them credit for, keen hearing, a powerful sense of smell, and an ability to read body language. Something about my approach made her remain still, though I could see tension in every ripple of muscle under her fur. We were locked in this tentative dance of trust. The cub, meanwhile, was crying frantically, its small voice echoing from the branches. I took a few steps closer, scanning the height of the pine. The branch was a considerable distance above the ground, and the trunk's bark was thick. How would I get the cub down? Climbing was an option, but a dangerous one slip, and I'd be falling from a considerable height. Besides, the mother bear might misunderstand my intentions if I climbed to her cub. Another plan needed to form. Taking a step back, I thought of alternative methods. Could I coax the cub down? Could I break a branch? The ideas were swirling, none of them fully developed. Then, to my horror, the cub's back paw slipped, sending a flurry of pine needles downward. My heart seized. If it fell, no one could save it. Time was short. With trembling fingers, I removed my backpack and set it on the ground, rummaging for rope. I carried a length of climbing rope, more as a precaution or for setting up a clothesline at camp, but now it might prove invaluable. I had about 20 feet of sturdy rope, too short to reach the bear cub from the ground. I looked around for something that could serve as an anchor or a means to lasso the branch. The mother bear let out another pained moan, her massive paws stomping restlessly. She was trusting me, in her own strange way, to fix this. It was overwhelming to realize a being so powerful was placing her hope in my hands. I stepped carefully around the tree, searching for vantage points. The trunk was massive, with thick branches lower down that might help me climb. Though I had some basic climbing experience, tackling a tall pine while under the watchful eyes of a distressed mother bear was nothing short of terrifying. "I'll try," I whispered again, hoping my tone remained soothing. Gently, I looped the rope over my shoulder, tightened the straps, and approached the trunk. My hands found knots in the bark, footholds in protruding lumps and small branches. The moment I started ascending, the mother bear let out a loud huff. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept going, step by step, hoping my slow movements conveyed that I wasn't threatening her cub. When I was about 12 feet up, I realized the cub was at least another 10 or 15 feet higher. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. The trunk had begun to sway slightly in the breeze. But more than that, I realized each yard I ascended placed me in a more precarious position. What if the mother bear changed her mind? What if she perceived me as a threat? I paused on a branch, breathing hard, and chanced a glance down. The mother bear remained at the base of the pine, gazing upward. She let out a short growl, and I froze. But then I saw her posture hadn't changed, her ears weren't laid back, her jaws weren't snapping. She was just anxious, as any parent would be. Somehow, that made me feel oddly connected to her, as though we were two living souls working toward a common goal, saving her child. I inched my way higher, carefully testing each branch's sturdiness before committing my weight. Bark flaked off under my hands, and pine needles grazed my cheeks. The cub was clinging to a branch that grew thinner the higher it extended. Every quake from the wind threatened to dislodge it. The poor thing cried continuously, its voice hoarse from desperation. Finally, I reached a branch close enough that I could extend my rope. My plan was to create a makeshift cradle or at least a loop around the cub's body to guide it down or help me carry it. But the cub was trembling violently, swaying with each shift in the wind. "Hey there," I murmured, my voice quivering. "I'm here to help you get back to your mom." The cub's small, round ears perked in my direction. Though it was afraid, it seemed to sense that I wasn't a predator. Bears are intelligent, and I hoped that intelligence would guide its cooperation. Slowly, I reached out with the rope, my arms shaking. The cub whimpered and tried to scoot further away from me, which caused the branch to bend alarmingly. Don't move, I pleaded, tears stinging my eyes from the sheer tension of the situation. I managed to drape the rope over the branch the cub was on. My intention was to hook it gently under the cub's belly, but the cub, panicking, swiped at the rope with its little paws, rolling precariously. My breath caught in my throat. If it fell now, the outcome would be disastrous. Below us, the mother bear paced, uttering deeper, agonized sounds. It felt like time was inching by at an agonizingly slow pace. My arms burned from clinging to the tree, my fingers trembling with fatigue. I needed a moment of calm to slip the loop around the cub. So I took a breath, drew on every ounce of courage I possessed, and spoke softly. "You're scared, and so am I," I said, my voice nearly lost in the swirl of leaves and pine needles. "But we can do this, okay? We can get you down." I recalled reading that bears, even cubs, can be coaxed by gentle noises. I began to hum a lullaby my grandmother used to sing to me. The melody felt out of place in this precarious setting, but it was all I could think of, a simple tune that had once calmed my childlike fears. The cub's whimpering quieted slightly, as if uncertain about this strange new sound. Using that moment, I slipped the rope forward. The cub tensed but didn't move away this time. My hands moved with excruciating slowness, hooking the rope under its belly and over its back. I carefully tightened the loop, ensuring it wouldn't hurt the cub but would still hold its body weight if it slipped. Now came the hardest part, guiding the cub toward me or helping it descend. If I tried to pull it across the branch, it might cling harder out of fear. If I let it descend on its own, it might lose its grip. I glanced down again, feeling the swirl of vertigo. The mother bear's eyes were locked on us. I decided to slowly climb back down and gently guide the cub with the rope from below, giving it some support if it slipped. Bit by bit, I lowered myself on the trunk. As I descended, the rope grew taut, meaning the cub was moving. My heart soared. Maybe it was climbing on its own, trusting the tension of the rope as a guide rail. I was halfway down, perched on a thick branch. I took another look up. The cub was inching backward, its claws scraping the bark while I provided tension on the rope to steady its movement. The mother bear below was standing on her hind legs now, front paws on the trunk, as if she wanted to reach up and catch her cub. 3 feet from me, the cub's paw slipped again. Its hindquarters dangled in midair. I jerked the rope taut, arms straining. The cub scrambled with its front paws, hooking its claws into the bark. A squeal of terror erupted from it, loud and sharp, and I felt my entire body convulse with a rush of adrenaline. My feet slipped slightly on the branch, sending a small avalanche of bark and pine needles tumbling down. I don't know where the strength came from, but I managed to hold the rope steady. The cub wriggled, finding footing again. Slowly, it backed down until it was only a foot above me, and I guided it onto the branch I stood on. There, we both paused, panting from exertion and fear. I was close enough to see the cub's tiny chest rising and falling, its dark eyes wide with alarm. It caught mine. We shared a strange, intimate moment, 2 living creatures united by the simple, urgent desire to survive. Then, I started descending again, this time with the cub above me. We continued in this manner, me guiding the rope, the cub gingerly clawing its way down. The mother bear paced in circles, letting out small moans, half encouraging, half terrified. When at last the cub was only a few feet above the ground, it jumped, landing in a clumsy heap near its mother's massive paws. The mother bear let out a sharp roar, not of anger, but of relief, and nuzzled her cub fiercely. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over, or so I thought. My feet touched the ground with shaky relief. Every muscle in my body trembled from the strain, and a subtle wave of nausea told me I'd been dangerously high on adrenaline. The mother bear had her cub between her paws, licking its fur while emitting a deep, throaty purr that sounded like maternal relief. Despite all my caution, I couldn't help but smile at the sight. It was heartwarming seeing them reunited. But I was still standing a mere 20 feet away from a grizzly bear with her cub. The danger hadn't vanished. Mother bears are especially protective after a rescue. It's not as though she'd pat my shoulder and send me off with a wave. Yet a tiny voice inside me insisted this was no ordinary situation. Indeed, after a few moments of reunion, the mother bear lifted her head, her eyes fixed on me again. My pulse quickened. Slowly, she took a step toward me and then another, the cub sticking close to her leg. I could see my reflection in those dark, soulful eyes. My brain screamed that I should back away, but some intangible bond rooted me to the spot. The mother bear came within a distance that was definitely too close for comfort in normal circumstances, and then, astonishingly, she bowed her head for a moment. It wasn't a cartoonish gesture of gratitude but a subtle lowering of her muzzle and a gentle chuff, a sound bears sometimes use to communicate amicable intent. My breath caught in my throat. The cub followed its mother's example, peeking out from behind her. I could see a faint curiosity in its gaze, as if to say, "This is the one who saved me." I nodded slowly, tears welling in my eyes, an overwhelming wave of emotion surging through me. "I'm just a person, and you're a creature of the wild, yet you trust me." A faint realization whispered through my mind. Perhaps she wasn't thanking me in the way humans do, but it felt that way. She was acknowledging me, extending a measure of respect or closeness that left me humbled in a profound way. My fear slowly receded. For one timeless moment, I existed in her world, not as an intruder but as part of the forest's tapestry. In that instant, a breeze murmured through the pines, carrying a sense of tranquility, as if the forest itself was exhaling relief. And then, as gently as she had approached, the mother bear turned and led her cub away. With fluid elegance, they lumbered between the trees, the cub following dutifully behind, occasionally glancing back at me. Soon, they vanished into the dappled shadows, and it was just me again, alone in the hush of nature. My knees gave out as soon as they were gone, and I sank onto the leaf-strewn ground. Tremors coiled through my limbs, and I realized I was on the verge of sobbing. I saved a bear cub. The magnitude of what had happened was staggering. My chest heaved with each breath, as if I'd been sprinting for hours. I thought about the mother bear's eyes, how they had pleaded for my help and expressed silent relief. I felt a surge of admiration, even love, for that majestic beast. For so long, I had believed that I was small and powerless in the face of life's trials. But in the forest, in this moment, I had discovered something within myself that I never knew existed. Courage mixed with empathy, a willingness to risk my own safety for another living being. As I sat there, tears of relief and wonder spilled down my cheeks. The events of the last hour played like a vivid, surreal dream. I felt my perspective shifting. The boundaries we place between ourselves and nature seemed to blur. Sometimes, we like to believe we are separate, that the wilderness is other. But that day, I realized that we are intertwined, our existence is part of a larger story told by the earth. I looked at my trembling hands, remembering how they had felt on the rope, the texture of the pine bark biting into my fingers. That memory, the cub's wide, terrified eyes and the mother's anguished cries, was seared into my heart. I knew it would remain there forever, a testament to the raw, unspoken connection I had formed with these wild creatures. Eventually, I stood, brushing leaves from my clothing. My immediate inclination was to find a ranger station, share my story, and confirm that both mother and cub were truly safe. My second inclination was to keep it to myself, to protect them from any undue attention. Yet I knew the park rangers cared deeply for the wildlife and might appreciate a heads-up. I decided to continue my hike, though I wanted to see if the mother bear and cub had truly moved on without further trouble. The day was still bright, the sun casting shifting patterns on the forest floor, and a sense of renewed purpose filled me. Each step felt like I was walking on sacred ground, my senses attuned to every rustle and whisper of the forest. Light cascaded between branches, creating golden beams that illuminated pockets of moss and lichen. Birds flickered through the canopy, their songs weaving a gentle lullaby. The memory of the mother bear lingered, as if the forest had united in one single story of compassion. I came across a small clearing where the sun's rays fell unfiltered. Moss-laden logs lay strewn across the grass, and in the center was a cluster of wild flowers, lupin and Indian paintbrush swaying softly in the breeze. The air was thick with pine-scented tranquility. I felt called to rest there, to process the waves of emotion still stirring inside me. Sitting on a fallen log, I pulled my grandmother's notebook from my backpack. My heart twisted with grief for her loss, yet I also felt her presence strongly, as though she were there, guiding me to be mindful and to appreciate nature's wonders. I wrote down every detail of the bear incident, the mother's wails, the cub's peril, the climb, and the moment the mother bear locked eyes with me in that unexpected communion. The words flowed freely, and each letter felt like an act of healing. I closed the notebook, hugging it to my chest. A part of me felt reborn. The anger and sadness that had weighed me down before this trip, my broken heart, my sense of rootlessness, now had a place to rest. It was as if nature had absorbed my burdens, and in return, I had taken on a new empathy for all living creatures, forging a deeper understanding of the mutual care that can exist between humans and animals. That evening, with the sun dipping behind jagged peaks, I found a campsite near one of the park's many streams. I pitched my small tent, boiled water for a simple meal of dehydrated soup, and let the forest's nocturnal chorus wash over me. Frogs croaked in the distance, and the wind rustled through the treetops. I mulled over the day's events, the extraordinary, nerve-wracking rescue, the sense of bond I'd felt with the mother bear. My mind kept returning to that moment when she lowered her head in what felt like gratitude. Could it be that nature recognized my good intention? Was it possible for a wild animal to display such empathy? I remembered reading about the intelligence of grizzlies, how they can form strong memories and even hold grudges against hunters or people who had done them harm. It didn't seem so far-fetched, then, that gratitude might also be in their emotional repertoire. I hardly slept that night. Instead, I lay in my sleeping bag, gazing at the tent roof illuminated by moonlight, a swirl of thoughts vying for attention. I replayed that scene over and over in my head, teetering between marvel and disbelief. I felt something shift deep within me, a reaffirmation of the goodness in the world and of my own capacity to be part of it. Sunrise came with a flourish of gold across the mountains. I crawled out of my tent and brewed coffee on my small camp stove, taking in the crisp air that smelled of damp earth. The memory of the previous day still felt vivid, not at all like a dream. I decided to head toward the nearest ranger station after packing up. They needed to know about the mother bear and her cub, if only to monitor the area. As I tread along a narrow path that wound through thick woods, I found myself scanning the forest, half expecting to see the mother bear again. It was unlikely, such encounters are rare, and she had every reason to avoid more human contact now that her cub was safe. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't ominous, but more like the forest had accepted me as an ally, an unexpected caretaker. Each rustle of leaves felt like a gentle greeting, each bird call like an acknowledgement. The sense of peace wrapped around me like a warm shawl, and I found myself smiling quietly. When I arrived at the ranger station, a modest wooden structure with a green metal roof, a pair of friendly rangers stood outside, engaged in conversation. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with a graying beard and a calm demeanor that spoke of years spent in wild places. The other was a younger woman, her dark hair tucked into a tight braid. They greeted me with the typical warmth of park staff, always ready to help or listen to a visitor's tale. Their names were Ranger Reed Parker and Ranger Kiera Chang. Reed noticed the scrapes on my hands first, remnants of climbing the pine, and asked if I needed medical attention. That was all the opening I needed to relay my astounding story. Their eyes widened as I recounted the mother bear's cries, the cub trapped in the branches, and the rescue. I tried to remain factual, avoiding exaggeration, but my voice trembled when I spoke of the terror and wonder I experienced high up on that pine. I finished with how the mother bear seemed to show a gesture of thanks. To my relief, neither of them dismissed my account as a fanciful tale. Ranger Chang placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, telling me that, while extremely rare, there have been documented cases of bears showing something akin to gratitude or non-aggressive acknowledgement. Ranger Parker stroked his beard thoughtfully, reminding me that these animals are highly intelligent and have complex emotional spectrums. "Thank you for letting us know," Ranger Parker said. "We might patrol that area discreetly to ensure the cub is healthy and that no precarious situations develop. Your actions were incredibly brave, though we usually advise folks not to get so close." I nodded, understanding the official stance. My decision had been perilous, yet hearing them acknowledge the possibility of an emotional bond between us gave me relief. I wasn't just imagining it, something real had happened in that forest. Before I left, Ranger Parker provided me with the park's direct line. "Keep in touch, Elena, and be careful out there." I thanked them, my mind swimming with a deeper appreciation for the complexities of wilderness management. As I walked away, I felt a pang of longing, like I was leaving behind a piece of my heart in that conversation. Part of me wanted to stay, to become a caretaker of the forest, to watch over the wildlife. But I had my own life to return to eventually, even if it felt different now. I spent the next few days roaming the park's trails. Each day began with me packing my gear and venturing into new corners of Glacier. From hidden waterfalls shimmering like liquid diamonds to meadows ablaze with wildflowers, my camera captured the park's spirit, but it couldn't grasp the intangible wonder I felt in each breath of wind. I camped beside lakes that mirrored starlight in their still waters. I scrambled up rocky slopes overlooking miles of pristine wilderness, and I listened, truly listened, to the hum of existence around me. I found solace in reading my grandmother's notebook, which listed species she had encountered near her home. I added my own notes about the flora and fauna of Glacier, scribbling down sketches of birds I spotted and describing the ambience of each new place I explored. Throughout these days, the memory of the bears remained my constant companion. I told myself I probably wouldn't see them again and tried to accept that as the natural order of things. Yet whenever I glimpsed a cluster of pines or heard the rustle of branches, My mind ignited with the possibility that it could be her, the mother who had dared to trust me. The park was massive, though, and the chance of crossing paths was slim. And then it happened. On the fourth day since the rescue, I was traversing a narrow, canyon-like trail flanked by jagged rock walls, where the occasional spindly pine clung, defying gravity. The sun was high, beating down on the canyon floor. My boots kicked up dust with each step, and my pack felt heavier than usual. I turned a corner and found myself in a small clearing dotted with wild raspberry bushes. As I drew closer, I saw them, two shapes near the edge, partially hidden by foliage. My heart leapt. It was the mother bear and her cub. She was sniffing at the bushes, and the cub, seemingly none the worse for the ordeal, was copying her, trying to snatch at leaves and berries. In any normal context, the immediate reaction should be caution and distance. But I couldn't quell the surge of recognition that flooded me. I halted, raising my arms slightly to make myself appear larger and less threatening, the typical advice for bear encounters, but also remembering the last encounter. My chest tightened with a swirl of anxiety and quiet hope. The mother bear lifted her head. Our gazes locked again, and the breeze seemed to still. Did she remember me, or was she simply registering another human? Part of me argued that I was imposing human emotions onto a wild creature, but as our eyes met, a whisper of that deep connection reawakened. I stood still, heart pounding. She didn't flee, nor did she charge. She simply regarded me as if measuring my intent. Then her cub noticed me too. It made a little huff, stepping slightly closer to its mother. I instinctively took a slow step backward, letting them know I wasn't seeking a confrontation. And then something surreal occurred. The mother bear huffed softly and nudged her cub, almost as if encouraging the small one to observe. The cub peered out from behind her protective flank. My eyes teared up, a wave of emotions hitting me like a tidal surge. Was this a greeting? A moment of recognition? We had shared a life-changing event, and the cub's wide eyes seemed to reflect a curious familiarity. After a time that felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat, the mother bear lowered her muzzle into the bushes, returning to her foraging. The cub did the same. She was neither ignoring me nor engaging with me directly. It was as though we had reached a mutual understanding that neither party wished the other harm. Quietly, I backed away, giving them space. Adrenaline rushed through me, tinged with an overwhelming sense of joy. This was beyond coincidence. That they were comfortable enough to remain foraging meant they perceived no immediate threat. I turned and walked away, shaking slightly, tears slipping down my cheeks. It was a confirmation that we can hold a space for peaceful coexistence, if only we approach with respect and humility. For the rest of my trip, I carried that encounter within me like a precious gift. My perspective on life, and my own capabilities, changed. In the bear's actions, I perceived a lesson that sometimes we must let go of fear to embrace possibility. We must trust that not every confrontation ends in violence. And perhaps most profoundly, that a single act of compassion can bridge worlds. On my final night in Glacier National Park, I found a tranquil overlook where a wide valley spread beneath me, painted in the day's last golden hue. I sat on a rocky ledge, feeling the gentle warmth of the sun's final rays on my face. My grandmother's notebook lay open in my lap, filled with sketches and notes of my observations. I recorded my last thoughts. Today, I saw a mother bear and her cub again. They looked well. Perhaps it was fate. Perhaps it was the forest guiding me. My heart is full. I feel stronger than ever, unafraid of the future, ready to face new challenges with the same boldness that climbed that pine to save a life. My burdens seemed lighter, my regrets softened by the beauty of this place. I had found hope here. In the land shaped by ancient glaciers and the creatures that call it home. I closed the notebook and gazed at the horizon. The wind ruffled my hair, carrying faint echoes of bird calls in the distance. The setting sun cast a fiery glow on the peaks, turning them into silhouettes of untamed grandeur. The miracle that had occurred wasn't just that I had saved a bear cub, it was that I had found a kind of salvation for myself. In the deep hush of the wilderness, morning arrived cloaked in a haze of lavender and gold, the early light filtering softly through the pines and illuminating the contours of the valley. My sleeping bag felt unusually warm, even though the air was still crisp. Perhaps it was the lingering glow of the last few days that surrounded me. As I unzipped the tent and stepped onto dew-kissed grass, I felt a subdued excitement pulsing through me. This was my final morning in Glacier National Park, and I knew I was about to leave with far more than I had brought in. I took my time preparing coffee over my small camp stove, savoring the simplicity of boiling water in the open air. Each day in this place had begun in near silence, broken only by birdsong echoing from the canopy and the gentle whisper of wind against the tent. Today, though, that silence felt different. It was both a farewell and a promise, as if the forest acknowledged that I had come to learn and was now returning to the wider world, changed. When everything was packed, I lingered, turning in a slow circle to take in the last glimpses of my makeshift home. I inhaled the earthy aroma of moss and damp pine needles one final time, imprinting it in my memory. My heart felt suspended between an intense longing to remain and the realization that life inevitably moves forward. Over the last few days, I had grown used to measuring time by shifting light and the calls of wild creatures rather than the beep of alarms or the constant alerts on a phone. The thought of returning to a world defined by screens and schedules made me uneasy. A part of me wanted to walk the same trails one last time, particularly the spot where I had encountered the mother bear and her cub. The path there was remote, well off the beaten track, and I was unsure if I had time before my planned departure. But I felt a quiet pull, as if the forest itself was beckoning me to say a more deliberate goodbye. Throwing my pack over my shoulders, I followed that intuition. The trail was damp underfoot, the morning dew shimmering on leaves and spiderwebs. As I hiked, I reflected on who I had been before coming here, a small-town librarian whose life had felt stalled by grief and heartbreak. The Elena who had stepped off the bus at the park entrance bore the weight of old sorrows and fresh disappointments. In contrast, the Elena walking this path now felt lighter, steadier, more grounded in the promise of possibility. I was amazed by how a single event, the desperate wail of a mother bear, had shattered the walls I had built around my heart. It took nearly an hour to reach the clearing where I had first encountered them, the spot beneath a towering pine that held so many of my memories. The terrified cub clinging to its precarious perch, the frantic mother pacing at the base, and the adrenaline-fueled rescue that bound me to them in a way I could scarcely believe. No trace of them remained now. The pine needles lay scattered, the ground showing only faint impressions of paws long gone. Still, I could sense their presence imprinted here, an echo of need and relief that had sparked something new in my soul. I stood quietly, remembering the feel of the rope cutting into my palms, the quake of my heart each time the cub slipped. I could almost hear my own ragged breathing echo in the hush. I thought back to the triumphant moment when mother and cub were finally reunited and how she had locked eyes with me, A silent communion that transcended any boundary of species or language. In that moment, I had been certain that some deep barrier within me had cracked open, allowing empathy and courage to pour forth in equal measure. A soft breeze played through the branches overhead, ruffling my hair as if in gentle reassurance. I opened my grandmother's notebook one last time, rereading the words I had written soon after the rescue. My handwriting was a bit uneven, the letters penned in the aftermath of trembling muscles and swirling emotions. I have found hope here, in the land shaped by ancient glaciers and the creatures that call it home. That single sentence felt like a vow, an affirmation that I would carry with me wherever I went, a reminder not to lose sight of what truly matters. Before closing the notebook, I wrote a final entry. I come full circle, standing in the same place where I was tested by fear and guided by compassion. I leave this forest not as I arrived, but with the knowledge that every being, big or small, furred or not, can become a mirror that shows us our own capacity for empathy. I am endlessly grateful. Snapping the notebook shut, I ran my fingers across its worn cover. A wave of sorrow and gratitude passed through me in unison. Then, I took a small stone from the clearing, a smooth pebble I found near the base of the pine, and slipped it into the front pocket of my pack. It was a little token, a piece of the forest story that I would bring back into my world. The walk back to my car was filled with the kind of silence that feels alive with promise. I listened to each footstep crunch against gravel and pine needles, watching sunbeams transform from pale gold into the brighter rays of mid-morning. When the edge of the parking lot appeared through the trees, I felt a pang. The day had barely begun, yet the moment of departure was here. I loaded my gear, pausing to take in the sweeping views one final time, the valleys carved by glaciers, the dense green of the forest canopy, and the sky that stretched on forever. In the distance, I thought I heard the faint echo of a chuff. Maybe it was just my imagination conjuring the mother bear's sound, but it made me smile, a final blessing from a story I would cherish all my life. I started the engine, the car rumbling to life, feeling foreign and mechanical against the tranquil hush I was leaving behind. As I slowly pulled away, gravel crunching under the tires, my chest flooded with both sadness and excitement. Yes, I was leaving the park, but in truth, I knew Glacier would never truly leave me. I had learned to see beyond my old fears and heartbreak, realizing that within every challenge, no matter how terrifying, a chance for growth and unity could be found. The mountains receded in the rearview mirror, yet my thoughts drifted back to the mother bear and her cub, safe and free somewhere within those vast woods. Images of them striding under ancient pines filled my imagination, and I realized that their lives would go on, shaped by the same cycles of nature, endless, unbroken, and resonant with beauty. My life, too, would continue, but now threaded with courage and the unshakable conviction that miracles can happen when we choose compassion over fear. By the time I reached the main road leading away from Glacier National Park, I felt strangely at peace. In those mountains, I had found a story worth telling and a spark worth protecting. No longer a simple traveler, I was now a bearer of that spark, determined to share a message that humans and nature, far from being separate, can come together in moments that transcend our everyday boundaries. Yes, I was saying goodbye to the rugged skyline, the towering pines, and the glittering lakes. But in another sense, I was saying hello to a new self, a new purpose, and a renewed belief in all that is possible when we listen to the wild voices calling us. To be brave. To be gentle. And above all, to be kind. The extraordinary rescue of a helpless cub in Glacier National Park wasn't just a moment of desperation. It was a testament to the powerful bond that can form when compassion overcomes fear. If you found meaning, wonder, or inspiration in this story, I invite you to be part of its legacy. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel so we can continue exploring these hidden realms of courage, connection, and nature's profound magic together. Your support ensures we keep discovering the beauty that thrives when we open our hearts to the wild places, and the wild within ourselves.